Blue Origin just lost more than a rocket. They lost the only place on Earth they had to launch one. Around 9 p.m. Eastern on Thursday, May 28th, the Florida coast lit up like a second sunrise. Cameras at Cape Canaveral were already rolling, live stream chat rooms were already counting down, and a 321-foot machine called New Glenn was sitting on its pad, waiting for 7 of the most powerful methane engines ever built to roar to life. The rocket is gone. The pad is gone. And what's coming next is something nobody at Blue Origin wants to talk about yet. This was supposed to be a hot fire test, a routine check before flight. The engines fire for a few seconds while the rocket stays bolted to the ground. The data gets reviewed, and if everything looks clean, you launch the next week. New Glenn's 4th mission, NG-4, was scheduled for June 4th, just 1 week away. The payload waiting in a clean room across Florida was a stack of 48 Amazon LEO satellites, the first batch in a contract worth billions of dollars. Bezos was preparing to deliver. Then his rocket disagreed. The press releases skipped over the worst part. Launch Complex 36 was not just a launch pad. It was the only orbital launch pad Blue Origin had. Not a backup, not a secondary site. The only one. Blue Origin spent over $1 billion rebuilding it from the ground up, finishing in 2021. It was the first launch complex newly rebuilt at the Cape since the 1960s. The original LC-36 dates back to 1962, when it was built to launch the Atlas Centaur. Across 6 decades, the site has seen 148 launches. Blue Origin demolished the old pads and built one massive new one in their place, engineered around the size and weight of New Glenn. There is not another pad like it in the country. The 188-foot first stage, packed with liquid oxygen and methane, ignited at the base, and as the upper stage above it tilted and started to fall, the entire stack went up. The transporter erector, the giant scaffold that holds the rocket upright and rolls it from the hangar to the pad, was sitting right next to it. Gone. At least one of the lightning protection towers, the steel masts that surround the pad like sentries, vaporized. By Friday morning, Blue Origin was warning beachgoers in Florida that debris might wash ashore in the coming days. That's how big the blast was. Pieces of rocket are still landing. Homes in Cape Canaveral and Cocoa Beach shook from the explosion. Residents who were watching TV felt the ground move under them. The internet filled with photos of an orange glow lighting up the coast for miles inland. Compare that to the last time something like this happened on the Cape. September 2016, SpaceX, a Falcon 9 sitting on Pad 40, a fueling operation gone wrong, a fireball that took out the rocket, and an expensive Israeli communications satellite riding on top. The Falcon 9 fleet was grounded for 3.5 months. The pad itself was out of action for more than a year. SpaceX had options. They moved launches to Pad 39A at the Kennedy Space Center. They used Vandenberg in California. They kept flying. Blue Origin does not have options. Until LC-36 is rebuilt, every New Glenn that exists, and every New Glenn they're still building, has nowhere to go. So how bad is the timeline? That's where the story gets uncomfortable. Amazon is now in trouble. Real trouble. Their entire satellite internet business, the one they're building to compete with Starlink, depends on getting satellites into orbit fast. SpaceX has over 7,600 Starlinks up there already, serving more than 10 million subscribers. Amazon, by contrast, has between 210 and 241 satellites in orbit, depending on which week you count. And the Federal Communications Commission, the agency that hands out the licenses that make satellite businesses legal, requires Amazon to put 1,618 satellites into orbit by July 30th of 2026. That's 2 months from now. They've already filed for a 2-year extension, but the math is brutal either way. The 24 launches Amazon contracted with Blue Origin were the workhorse of the plan. NG-4 was Launch 1. There is no Launch 1 anymore. The first 48 satellites were not on board during the test, which is the one piece of good news in the whole story. The other 23 launches are sitting in limbo, waiting for a pad that does not exist. And the deadline does not care. Imagine running one of the biggest companies in the world. You've committed to building a global satellite network to compete with Starlink, and you've spent $10 billion to do it. Your biggest single bet for getting those satellites into orbit is a rocket built by a company owned by the man who founded your own company. You spend years coordinating manifest schedules, building factories, training ground teams. Then, one night, while you're at home in Seattle, a live stream from Florida lights up your phone. A massive explosion. Your biggest launch partner's only pad in flames. That's Andy Jassy's Thursday night. Now let's talk about the part that matters even more than satellites: the moon. 2 days before the explosion, on May 26th and 27th, NASA announced a package of contracts worth nearly $1 billion for its moon-based program. Buried in that announcement was a name: Blue Origin. The award was $188 million, with an option period worth an additional $280 million for the delivery of 2 lunar terrain vehicles to the moon's south pole. The rover that will roll across the dust where Apollo never reached, the wheels that will leave the first American tracks on the lunar surface in over 50 years. Blue Origin won that contract. And the lander that will carry the rovers, the Blue Moon Mark 1, does not have its own ride to the moon. It launches on top of a New Glenn, the same New Glenn that is currently scattered in pieces across Cape Canaveral. NASA Administrator Jared Isaacman posted a careful statement on Friday morning. He said the agency was aware of the anomaly. He said the agency would work with partners to support a thorough investigation. He said spaceflight is unforgiving. He did not say that the Artemis 3 low Earth orbit demonstration of Blue Moon, scheduled for mid-2027, depends on New Glenn. He did not say that the Moon Base 1 mission, targeted for the fall of this year, depends on New Glenn. He did not say that Artemis 4, the mission that will actually put astronauts back on the lunar surface in 2028, depends on Blue Moon to land them. He did not say that the entire architecture of America's return to the moon, he did not have to. The math says it for him. There is another problem hiding in the smoke: the BE-4. The BE-4 is the engine that drives the New Glenn first stage. 7 of them are bolted to the bottom of the rocket. Each one produces about 640,000 pounds of thrust at sea level. They burn liquid methane, the same chemical compound as natural gas, mixed with liquid oxygen, in what's called an oxygen-rich staged combustion cycle. They are powerful, complex, and relatively new. They are also the engines that power United Launch Alliance's Vulcan Centaur rocket. 2 engines per Vulcan instead of 7, but they're the same hardware, same design, same supplier. The BE-4 has a track record that should make people nervous. The engine was originally announced back in 2014. It took until 2024 to fly. The development was plagued with problems and delays, and on June 30th of 2023, a BE-4 engine exploded 10 seconds into a test, damaging the test stand. Blue Origin investigated, made changes, and eventually got the engine to fly. The first Vulcan launch in January 2024 was a success. So was the maiden flight of New Glenn 1 year later. The engines have worked. They have also blown up before, on the ground, during exactly the kind of test that just blew up at LC-36. If the investigation finds that a BE-4 engine failed Thursday night, the Vulcan program has a serious problem too. Vulcan flies critical national security payloads for the Department of Defense. It launches Space Force satellites. It carries spy satellites and missile warning systems, and the kinds of things the United States cannot afford to delay. A BE-4 grounding would extend well beyond Blue Origin. It would put America's primary heavy lift options in question across the board. Spaceflight Now, the publication that covers the launch industry more closely than anyone, raised that exact question within hours of the explosion. The investigation has not blamed the engines yet. The investigation has not blamed anything yet. The root cause is still being pieced together from telemetry and the molten remains of a launch pad. But every hour that passes without a clear answer keeps that worst-case scenario on the table. This was not the first warning. Blue Origin's third New Glenn flight, back on April 19th, ended with a stranded satellite. The mission was called Bluebird 7, carrying a satellite for AST Space Mobile, a company building space-based cell towers that beam mobile service directly to your phone from orbit. The satellite was expensive, ambitious, and irreplaceable. The first stage flew well. It even came back and landed on a drone ship in the Atlantic. That was the kind of thing Blue Origin badly needed to prove they could do, because reusable first stages are the only way to compete with SpaceX on cost. But the upper stage, the part that actually puts the payload into orbit, failed. A cryogenic leak. Liquid oxygen, colder than anything you'd find in nature, leaking somewhere it should not have been, froze a hydraulic line solid. The engine could not gimbal properly. The thrust pointed somewhere wrong. The satellite was released into an orbit no one wanted, drifting in a place where it cannot do the job it was built for. The FAA grounded the rocket, ordered an investigation, identified 9 corrective actions, and only cleared New Glenn to fly again on May 27th. Think about the timing here. The FAA released their final report on the April mishap on May 27th. New Glenn was officially clear to return to flight. Less than 36 hours later, the rocket was burning on the pad. The FAA is not investigating this one. Static fire tests are not within the scope of FAA-licensed activities. Air traffic was not affected. That is what they'll tell you. What they won't tell you is that the agency had just cleared a rocket whose engines hadn't yet been tested as a stack on the pad. Now, those engines have answered that question for everyone. We don't yet know whether the failure was an engine, a propellant system, a valve, a software issue, a structural problem with the pad infrastructure, or some combination. We may not know for months. Blue Origin will run that investigation. Blue Origin will determine the root cause, and until that investigation is complete and the cause is publicly identified, the pad cannot be cleared for further operations. Best case scenario, based on what happened to SpaceX in 2016, you're looking at a year before LC-36 can host another rocket. Worst case, longer. New Glenn would have to find another way to fly during that time, except there is no other way. There is only LC-36. Let me anchor this for you. Blue Origin had planned 8 to 12 New Glenn launches in 2026. SpaceX has between 140 and 145 launches planned for the same year. That gap was already enormous before Thursday night. It just widened by, conservatively, every single Blue Origin launch left in the calendar. The company is valued at around $100 billion. SpaceX is preparing for a public offering at a valuation between $1.75 and $2 trillion. The market is not a sentimental place. It will not wait politely while LC-36 gets rebuilt. A New Glenn costs somewhere between $68 and $110 million per flight, depending on how you account for development. The whole program has cost Blue Origin at least $2.5 billion to bring to this point. Thursday night, in roughly 30 seconds, a chunk of that investment evaporated. Not just the rocket, the pad it was sitting on, the infrastructure built around it, the launch slot, the customer confidence, the momentum. All of it, gone in an explosion that lasted less than a minute. Bezos posted on Friday morning. The statement was short. All personnel are accounted for and safe. It's too early to know the root cause, but we're already working to find it. Very rough day, but we'll rebuild whatever needs rebuilding and get back to flying. It's worth it. It's a calm statement, composed. The kind of thing you write when you've already spent 2 hours alone in a room before composing it. Elon Musk responded with a single line. Most unfortunate. Rockets are hard. Which is true. Rockets are hard. But it was also the comment of a man who watched his biggest competitor lose its only launch pad on national television and answered with 7 words. You can feel the weight of those 7 words. Here is what I keep coming back to. The fireball that lit up Florida on Thursday night was bright enough to be visible from highways miles inland. Residents in nearby homes felt the ground shake. The shockwave rattled windows in Cocoa Beach. By the time the smoke cleared, the rocket was gone, the pad was gone, the transporter was gone, lightning towers gone, hardware that took years to assemble vaporized in seconds. And the consequences of that blast will not finish unfolding for a year or more. If you've never seen a rocket explosion at close range, here's an honest scale. A fully fueled New Glenn first stage holds hundreds of thousands of gallons of liquid methane and liquid oxygen. When that mixture ignites all at once, the chemical energy released is enough to vaporize anything within hundreds of feet. NASA, the FAA, and the Space Force have spent years studying exactly how big the explosion radius is for methane and oxygen propellants this size. The concern was always that vehicles like New Glenn, Starship, and Vulcan all use the same combination, and an accident on one pad could damage neighboring pads. If you'd been standing a mile away on Thursday night, the heat would have hit your face like an oven door slamming open. If you'd been standing on the pad, there would be nothing of you left to find. That's how much chemical fury was bottled up inside that machine. That's how much they were planning to ride into orbit 1 week from now. So what comes next? Blue Origin will rebuild. Bezos has the money, and he said as much. The pad will be reconstructed. The investigation will identify a cause. Engineers will redesign whatever needs redesigning, requalify whatever needs requalifying, and at some point, in some month of some year, a New Glenn will roll out to LC-36 and try this again. That's how spaceflight works. You fail, you analyze, you fix, you fly. It's the only path forward, and Blue Origin will walk it because Blue Origin has no other choice. But there is a wider context here that nobody at the company will say out loud. The launch industry has consolidated. The United States has effectively 2 heavy-lift launch providers, SpaceX and Blue Origin. The Department of Defense, NASA, Amazon, every commercial satellite operator that needs orbit, they all depend on one of those 2 companies. When one of them loses its only pad on a night that should have been routine, the entire American launch architecture wobbles. Vulcan Centaur depends on the same engines. Artemis depends on Blue Moon. Amazon depends on New Glenn. National security depends on options that don't all collapse at once. Thursday night cost more than a rocket. The blast exposed how thin the redundancy actually is, how much rests on so few machines. There is a number worth knowing. The first crewed mission of Artemis was originally supposed to put boots on the moon by 2024, then 2025, then 2026. The current target is 2028. Every single one of those slips happened before Thursday night. Now imagine the pressure on that 2028 date when one of the program's prime contractors is rebuilding from scratch. Nobody at NASA will want to discuss this part right now. The Chinese space program announced a target date for their crewed lunar mission, 2030. They've hit their previous milestones on schedule. Tiangong, their space station, is built and crewed. They've landed on the far side of the moon, something the United States has never done. They have a working lunar lander program, the Lanyue spacecraft, and they have already tested the engines that will get it there. China does not need American hardware, American engines, or American launch pads. They build their own. They launch from their own facilities at Wenchang and Jiuquan. Their timeline depends entirely on their own infrastructure, and their infrastructure is not currently smoking on a Florida beach. The race back to the moon was already tight before Thursday night. Now imagine you are sitting in Beijing on Friday morning, watching the video of the explosion on a screen, and asking yourself a single question. How long do we have before America catches up to where they thought they would be next month? The honest answer for the people who watch this for a living is somewhere between several months and several years. Every day that LC-36 is dark is a day where the gap closes. So when you watch the official statements over the next few weeks, remember what you're actually watching. You'll hear Blue Origin promise to rebuild. You'll see Bezos post calm updates. NASA will promise thorough investigations, and the FAA will explain why this one doesn't fall under their jurisdiction. You're not watching a single bad night for a single company. You're watching a stress test of how fragile America's path back to the moon really is. A test that just got handed on a silver platter to a country that's not currently dealing with the same problem. The wreckage at LC-36 will be cleaned up. The pad will rise again. Bezos will write checks until New Glenn flies. None of that is in doubt. What's in doubt is the price. The months that get lost. The customers that quietly redirect to other providers. The satellites that fall short of FCC deadlines. The lunar contracts that get reshuffled to whoever can still deliver. And the question, quiet but real, of whether spending $100 billion chasing SpaceX still results in a company that can compete when one bad night can erase your entire ability to fly. The fireball is gone now. The smoke has cleared. What's left is the slow, expensive, painful work of finding out exactly what failed and why, rebuilding what was lost, trying to convince everyone who depends on you that next time will be different. Spaceflight is unforgiving. That's the line everybody keeps using. It's a good line. It happens to be true. What makes a fireball at Cape Canaveral different from a fireball anywhere else is that it happens in front of the whole world, on live streams that millions of people watch in real time. There is no quiet failure here. There's only the public version. And the public version of Thursday night is going to follow Blue Origin for years. Bezos is right about one thing. It is worth it. Spaceflight has always been worth it. Every nation that ever reached orbit started by losing rockets, losing pads, losing engineers, losing dreams. The history of how humans get off this planet is a history written in fire. What happened Thursday night is one more page in that book. It's also a reminder. The road to the moon is not paved. It's built one rocket at a time, and every now and then, one of them comes apart in front of you. And the only thing you can do is start over. Blue Origin will start over. They have to. We'll see how long it takes. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.